All right, we are live. Welcome back to First Impressions. It's the girls again.
Hello, we're back.
It's Kristen and Maggie. We're back to give those double middle fingers to all those haters.
Now, Kristen, aren't we supposed to give the haters, what is it that Kevin said? Give them a nice hug instead.
The raspberries. Or comfort them that they hadn't gotten enough love in their childhoods.
What do we say to that?
They say, middle fingers to all the haters. We're back. We're badder than ever. We're the baddest bitches.
Baddest bitches in town, yeah.
Baddest Austen podcasting bitches in town. By the way, we're still
narrow field, but we're still the baddest.
Yeah, it is a narrow field. Yeah, I was looking in iTunes the other day at our podcast. Basically, you should just know that I read the reviews for my own vanity sometimes. But iTunes started suggesting some other podcasts, and there were a couple of other one-offs where people had talked about Jane Austen on their reading book series, but there's no other all Jane Austen all the time.
So Kristen, is what you're saying that we are the #1 rated podcast dedicated to Jane Austen on the North American iTunes charts?
Matter of fact, we're #1. That's still I'll drink to that.
Woo, #1. I will drink to that because the drink is back, ladies and gentlemen. It's happening.
I am drinking some super classy Merlot that I got out of a tiny little plastic bottle.
I'm drinking a cocktail called Wildfire that I made a huge picture of for my Game of Thrones season 6 rewatch party last night, and someone let me just put it this way, there were a lot of libations, so there's still a lot of Wildfire left.
Well, I guess this is going to be a very spirited discussion then.
Oh God, you should be ashamed of yourself.
I am all the time, but now no. Okay, so without further ado, today we are talking about the Jane Austen Book Club, the movie. And, the reason we're doing a separate podcast on the movie is because there was a little bit of a miscommunication in that for the Jane Austen Book Club, the book, I thought we were doing both the book and the movie, so I watched both. But Maggie hadn't watched the movie. And so...
Well, I'd watched it when it first came out.
Yeah.
Which was apparently in 2007, 10 years ago.
Oh, my God.
Longer.
It does feel longer.
So I did not really remember that much about it. So we had to do it. But now we'll do a full movie extravaganza Jane Austen Book Club podcast.
I'm kind of glad because I have a lot to say about this movie. I scribbled so many notes when I was watching it. And the more I watched it, the more I enjoyed it, to the point where I have a lot of things to say about it. Maggie, I know we were going to start with doing kind of a general thumbs up, thumbs down, and Maggie, you have some strong feelings as well.
I do, but I would say thumbs up overall. Definitely.
Okay, good.
I would recommend. I don't know if I would recommend this movie to everyone. But there are definitely people. I think overall, I would say I enjoyed watching this movie. This was a good movie.
Oh, good. Yeah, I enjoyed it too, and I remember kind of being irritated with it when it first came out, but it did stay with me. Like, a lot of scenes were very vivid in my memory. Yeah. And when I went back and watched it again, I was more charitable towards it. And then we both just watched it one more time this morning, and I have to say that even though some of the Austen criticism wasn't as satisfying as I would like it to be, I think overall they did a great job using Austen to tell stories about these characters' relationships, because when they do discuss the books, their perspectives are all colored by where they're coming from in their lives. And I thought that was clever the way that had been done.
I also felt that the Austen parallels were not as clear in the movie as they were in the book. And because of the form of storytelling, what it sometimes required was other characters to specifically point out during the discussion the parallels.
Yes, sometimes
like someone saying, "Oh, you're such a Fanny."
Yeah, or, you're such an Emma. Yeah, it was sometimes got a little on the nose.
Like in blah blah. But whereas the reader, you have more time to have the reader come to those realizations themselves. In a film, you only have 90 minutes, 2 hours. So.
Yes, yeah. So you have to bring it a little bit to the forefront. I figured that we would start the discussion basically just by talking about all the characters and the way that they have them meet and our general impressions of the characters and how they were introduced. So is there anything else overall that you wanted to say about the movie?
Overall, like I said, I really liked it. I did prefer the book. I think it had a little more depth of character and interesting things to say. As much as I had mentioned in our previous discussion that there were some things about the the flashbacks, extended flashbacks, that I was like, ugh. I actually missed those while watching the film. Yeah, I mean, they did. Some of the characters did say them to other characters, when I was a kid, blah blah. But I actually found that I kind of missed knowing more about these characters.
Yeah, well,
but overall, I did really enjoy watching it. I watched it all in one go, which is very unusual for me. Bay gets that's Bayard, not just B-A-E Bay, but B-A-Y Bay, for those who keep emailing us that, I thought it was Bay, like B-A-E. His name is Bayard. He is always getting mad at me because I'm a fractured movie watcher, where I will start and stop and pick up again. He calls me a monster.
Monster, you monster.
Yeah, he says you're history's greatest monster. But I just sat down and watched this whole movie. I was really into it.
Well, that's good. And you remember, this art was made to be watched all in one piece. So sit down, put your knitting aside, and sit down. And it's a reference to Bernadette constantly knitting throughout the movie. But let me talk. Okay, the only bad thing about this movie for me, the only thing that really drives me nuts, well, aside from Prudy and Dean, which is an annoyance in the book too, is the incredibly annoying title sequence. So when the credits start.
Oh, yeah. So what was that about? Is that, I'll let you do your thing. But I mean, I think I understood what they were getting at, but I'm not entirely sure.
Oh, I think I understood what they were getting at too, and it's so dumb. It's like modern life. Whoa, it's so complicated.
Yeah, exactly. It was like the little, like the annoyances of technology. Like, the vending machine doesn't read my dollar, or the gas machine won't pump my gas because it can't read my card correctly, or I can't reach the parking ticket. Like,
and the worst thing about it, worst thing about it is the stupid song they picked, and it went on forever, and the stupid song they picked is that, hey, I put some new shoes on and suddenly everything's fine. And it's this like new shoes song where it's the chorus is like he's singing about new shoes over and over. So I actually, the first time I watched this, got so irritated that I just fast forwarded through it and stopped it, and it was already in the middle of like the second scene or something.
This was the first time that you watched this movie. Wait, you're saying the first time you rewatched it, or the first time you ever watched it?
Rewatched it.
I was going to say that was probably on VHS.
I saw it on the movie. I saw it in the movie theater the first.
Did we see it together?
Did we?
I feel like if there's a Jane Austen movie, we probably saw it together, because we definitely saw Austen Land together.
We did, but I don't think we saw a Jane Austen book club together, because if it was 2007. Well, I don't know.
I was back from school. Yeah. I don't know. I think I definitely went with my mom. This is definitely a movie to go to with your mom.
But I actually, the second time to get me through. So to keep my sanity, the second time I watched this stupid credits title, I wrote down all of the crazy technology things that happened. So let me just bore you to tears. So I put my new shoes on. Oh no, my treadmill's going too fast. Put some new shoes on and suddenly, someone took my parking spot. I put some new shoes on and suddenly everything's fine. Oh, the printer's jammed. Oh no, I dropped my phone in the toilet. Oh no,
it was like a dumber version of the great montage at 9 to 5 when Lily Tomlin can't figure out how any of the things in the office work. She so actually, this is that interesting. Leads me to another point where when I first started watching it, based on the music and the way it was shot, I assumed it must date from like 1999 or 2000.
Yeah, it felt much older.
When I looked it up and realized it was released in 2007, because just the way it was directed, the way it looked, and the soundtrack they were using, it just really, to me, felt like it was from like late 90s, early aughts. And so I was really surprised to realize that it had originally come out in 2000. I mean, and I know I knew that because of the age of the actors in it. Like Emily Blunt is not that old, right? She couldn't have been playing Prudy in 1999. But it just felt like, it's like when you watch really old episodes of Friends.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I felt that too. I mean, it was just something about it felt corny and dated. But
yeah. Oh, and then like at the very end when it's like everyone looking over, cheering with their champagne, like free space. It just parts of it felt very dated.
And then,
that's a good way to describe it.
Should have just jumped in the air, and then it would have freeze framed on all of them. Jane Austen,
like freeze frame on Harry Potter on his broom in the third movie. But overall, the look of it did feel really much older to me. I was surprised. And part of that was the soundtrack. Like you're pointing out, the soundtrack choices just felt like so expected, I guess. A lot of this movie felt like it was kind of a paint by numbers, expected.
They did do some kind of stuff like that, but that all fell away for me in watching the story and the characters interact. So it didn't.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
Me.
No, it didn't ruin anything for me too. I agree.
I'm not sure I understand that. So the movie begins with a quote on the screen and then it fades away. And the quote is from Pride and Prejudice. It is not general incivility the very essence of love? And I am not sure I understand how that applies to the story in general, but okay.
Maybe they're talking. Maybe they're talking about how a lot of the tension in this story comes from characters being truthful with each other, and generally we would consider being like blunt truth to be somewhat incivil.
Yeah, there is a lot of truth telling in this movie.
They probably just needed to find a Jane Austen quote about love, so that's the one they picked. I don't know why they didn't just pick the one from the end of the book.
Yeah, I don't know. But the movie starts, and Jocelyn has just lost her dog, and she's had a whole funeral for it.
And that is different, right? That's a different start.
It is a different start. They're mourning the death of the dog, which in the book has died way earlier in the book. But that's okay. It's just a little choice that they made. But it's used as sort of a platform for Jimmy Smits, who plays Daniel, the husband of Sylvia and the father of his daughter, Allegra, right? So there's this family. There's Daniel, Sylvia. They're married, and they have the daughter, Allegra. And Daniel and his daughter, Allegra, are talking about Jocelyn and how she's been single all her life. And Daniel's like, well, you need companionship. You need sex, and you need love, and blah, blah, blah. And he sort of has a moment. And then the scene shifts to him and his wife, Sylvia, and they're having dinner. And okay, Daniel's played by Jimmy Smits. And I always thought of Jimmy Smits as a good actor, but he blew me away in this scene where he takes his wife to a fancy restaurant and they're sitting there and they're talking. And he brings up this conversation about love and companionship and sex. And then he says, it just made me so sad. And Sylvia, his wife, is sort of squinting at him. And he just comes right out with it that he wants this divorce and that he's seeing another woman. And he's talking about, I think that I don't
want to lie to you anymore.
I don't want to lie. I don't think we should quit while we're ahead. And it's almost like this spur of the moment decision that he's made, and it's all a torrent. It's coming out. And that scene was a gut punch for me. I mean, Jimmy Smits was a fantastic actor in that scene. It felt very organic and like two real people when she's like, how can you even imagine what you'd feel like or how you'd act when you get the news that your husband wants to leave you? But it seemed very real. And then they have to like walk to the car and she's sobbing and they got to, oh my God, they got to like drive home together. And he's like trying to explain himself. Oh, I'm passionate. And she's like, open the door. I need a tissue, right? Like she's being more practical. And she's like, who is this woman, and wants to hear about the details. And that did a lot to open up the two characters in their relationship but he keeps talking about wanting to quit while we're ahead, which is just a weird sentiment. So you can tell this totally came out of left field.
I was really impressed by Amy Brenneman's performance in that scene too, because every time he starts talking about it, she assumes he's talking about something else, like they're just having a normal conversation, like about their daughter or about something else. And so she doesn't realize this is a super important conversation until they're already halfway into it. And then it's like she got hit by a truck, she did not, I don't know. One of the main problems I had with this movie was when I realized that Amy Brenneman and Maggie Grace were playing Sylvia and Allegra, who are not, in my head, white people.
Right, they're not.
Like, speak Spanish. And Sylvia wants to make flan when she's upset.
Yeah.
And when I don't, I mean, I'm not, maybe I was being slow. Like, obviously, in my head, when I'm reading the book, I did not picture those two characters as white women. And then when I realized what I was seeing, it was when Amy Brenneman's upset and she calls character Mija. She says, Mija, go get a dozen eggs. I want to make a flan. And I was like, what? Amy Brenneman, I'm sorry. She does not look like the type of lady where she gets upset, she's going to go make a flan. Like, those are white women.
Yeah. Well,
and it made me really upset because that's, you know, there's all these conversations now about whitewashing in film. And it's like, we have just woken up to this as a thing that's happened since the beginning of film. And this was just like a bam example right in front of my face that I never would have noticed maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And it made me really upset, actually. I mean, they've got Jimmy Smith up in there, I guess, to lend some credibility. I don't know.
Yeah, points.
It was pretty shocking.
But yeah. And if it had been today, we would definitely be having that conversation too. But I don't know. I didn't trip over it because I thought that Amy Brenneman looked this is terrible, but because I knew she was supposed to be Latina, my brain just filtered her that way, you know,
she's also a great actress. I mean, Maggie Grace, like, I don't think that she's in the caliber of some of the other members of this cast, but she's good. Like, she's not terrible. She's good. Yeah. So whatever, but it was still very shocking when I just kind of had that light click moment, like, holy shit, they cast like these two super white women. And they're like talking in Spanish and it looks ridiculous.
Yeah. So that was that. And she's like, oh, I'm going to make a flan. Yeah. And that's sort of like her Eleanor moment where she's like, okay, we're going to do something constructive. But really, Sylvia, that, you know, the character whose husband just left, in the book, we're really supposed to see her as Eleanor. We're supposed to see her and her daughter Allegra as Eleanor and Marianne. In this movie, they've taken her and they've made her Fanny Price. And they've done something entirely different with it, which I think works better. And part of that is that she's the driver in many of the early book club scenes. She has an emotional meltdown. So they really couldn't do that if she was trying to play the Eleanor character. So that was better. And Prudy, who is, you know, we're supposed to think of her as a Fanny Price or whatever because she's not that likable. They make her more they kind of force her into the Persuasion story as well. And so when Prudy and Dean get together and like meet for the first time in this movie, it becomes very obvious that they have they went way over the top in making Dean the bad guy.
So you're referring to Prudy's husband, right? He's Dean. Yeah.
Prudy and Dean.
That was actually, so my number one main objection actually to the film versus the book is I thought the male characters really got a disservice. Especially with Dean. In the book, he's such a great guy.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why you don't really, Prudy, like, you don't really understand why she can't get it together because she actually has this amazing husband. And Dean in the book, look, it's Mark Lucas who played Riley on Buffy. And you know what? He's great. But when you've been Riley, like, you can't really ever come back from that. So I'm prone to not like him anyway. And then when you make him like a sports obsessed, blowing off a trip to Paris to go somewhere with his boss on a sports trip, like, I'm not.
No.
I didn't like that. There was no reason to turn him into a villain as far as I could see.
There's no reason for that. And here's the other thing. It made their marriage so unrealistic because she's this nerdy, French, cultured, obsessed kind of person that so there's this SNL sketch, right? The Needlers, the couple who should be divorced. They're the Needlers. They are the couple, Prudy and Dean, his husband and wife, who you cannot figure out how they ever got married in the first place. And that's what made their storyline very unrealistic. And when they sort of reconcile in the end, you're like, I don't buy it. Because and so Kevin made the point too, because Kevin did watch this with me. He is like, oh, Prudy and Dean, they've introduced Austen to her mortal enemy, sports, right?
Yeah. So then the way they like make up and come back together is by reading Persuasion together. And, you know, it's sweet, but I like that he is somewhat redeemed, I guess.
No,
but
this
it's
is the
just
thing,
he's
though,
just not. He's
they,
just
they made him so stupid and such a
caricature.
meathead.
Yeah, they made him a caricature.
They made him such a meathead that when in the end they do start reading Persuasion to each other, you're like, Dean can read? Like when he's reading a full sentence, he's like reading, like that's how much of a meathead they made him. So that's why it doesn't work at all with them. And the scene too, where they sort of have this big fight in the beginning, is that he was going to take her to Paris. As as you just said, she meets him up with him in a sports bar. He's watching a basketball game, so he can't even be bothered to pay attention.
I thought he did a really good job with his. Mark Lucas in this film did well with what they gave him. Like when his eyes were just constantly flitting back to the television,
yeah,
instead of looking at her. I think that was there were some really nice acting touches in here, but you just hate the character, right? He's just your typical egotistic douchebag.
Well, here's the other unrealistic thing. I am married to a huge NBA fan, and what Dean comes out with in this conversation is, oh, I forgot to tell you we're not going to Paris anymore. Instead, my boss wants me to take our clients to the NBA playoffs game.
Everybody knows the NBA playoff games do not take place at that time of year.
No, I don't think that's not my point. My point is that if you're a basketball fan and you get told that you're going to a playoffs game, this is not something you forget to tell your wife. This is something that you call everybody you know and say, "Hey, guys want to go?" So
I got the impression that his job was sports related. So because he said he's going with his boss, was that incorrect?
No, they're taking a client.
Yeah,
my boss wants me to take our clients to this game. So
I was under the impression that he was like a sports agent or something like that, but I guess he's not. He's just some kind of other person that has clients.
Yeah, and they, it's a manly going to sports kind of thing. So this is the Dean's insensitivity. Prudy, Emily Blunt's character, Prudy storms out, and then the bartender, Dean's like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong to the bartender. The bartender just like, okay, man. Like the bartender gives him like some serious side eye.
He said, I honestly have no idea what I did.
Yeah, I have no idea. Wrong.
Really?
It was so
because
wrong.
Canceling a trip to Paris and not telling your partner about it seems pretty obvious. Like you done fucked up.
But this is what leads to one of the most memorable parts of the movie to me, which I really loved. And I remembered this from the first time I saw it. It always stuck in my memory, is that Prudy, in her emotional state, goes to a movie theater where they're having an Austen Film Festival, and she stands in line to get a ticket for the Patricia Rozema Mansfield Park, which came out in 1998, which is a horrible film. And she's standing in line. And Bernadette, the character of Bernadette, this is how they meet. They sort of meet in line because Bernadette's right behind her talking to this other woman. And this other woman, this random woman, is like, oh, I'm a film teacher and I love teaching this movie to my students. And Bernadette turns to Prudy and says, do you like this movie? And of course she's sobbing and she's like, no. She's like, do you know they made the main character and the author the same person, and they made Sir Bertram, Sir Thomas rather, a slave owner, and this is ridiculous. And then the first film critic doesn't know how to respond to this, and she goes, well, I thought the screenplay was excellent.
Everything that we talked about when we talked about the movie.
It's like, who could possibly like this movie? Who could possibly like it?
And then because Bernadette is a force of nature, she just like pulls Prudy into her orbit.
Yeah, and then they go out and have Sundays and whatever. She's like, we're going to go do the book club. And then the final set of characters, and then and Bernadette's like, I get P and P, right?
Yeah.
Which is cute. But then the final set of characters that sort of meet is when Jocelyn meets Greg at the science fiction convention, which was so cute, but also a little bit too much slapsticks for me. But the guy that they cast to play Greg, his name is
Hugh Dancy.
Hugh Dancy, which is almost Mr. Darcy, and he plays a Mr. Darcy-esque character.
I thought again that they kind of dumbed him down too.
They dumped him. They made him a little geekier and a little less socially.
I spilled my coffee. And like he doesn't just take out the complete works of Jane Austen book. He like takes it out and throws it on drops it on the table. Aren't they all sequels?
Yes, he comes into the book club, the first meeting to discuss it, and he's all sweaty, and also he's in a full body because he has bicycles there. and he's in one of those full body spandex things, and you could just tell he's like sweaty and gross, and everybody's like, who the F is this guy? This guy is so weird.
This is something else that dated the movie for me. He walks in and he goes, oh, I waited 30 minutes at the other Starbucks. Golly, there's a lot of them these days, isn't there? And it's just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
That's like a level of commentary I expect from You've Got Mail, which is set in a very specific time period, right? Mm-hmm. But in 2007, where people still comment like, oh, there's a lot of Starbucks, you guys. Like, isn't that joke been played out by then?
Yes. Oh my God, I didn't even catch that, but that is so true.
Starbucks is well on its way to world takeover in 2007. Like the joke, like there's one on every corner. Like that's not even a joke anymore in 2007. It was just accepted.
When he does meet Jocelyn, they do have a meet cute in the elevator, and she tells the vampire, "Oh, I have the same dog collar." But yeah, so when the book club,
did you notice the Buffy reference?
Yes, there was Buffy reference, and yeah. So when you said that it was a Mark Lucas call out, I was like, well, I don't know about that. But then
no, I mean, I don't think it was an actual call. Like they cast Mark Lucas, and then they were like, oh, let's put a Buffy reference. I just thought it was cute.
I don't know, maybe they did.
So I am 100% sure that one of the writers on this movie is a huge Buffy fan.
Yes.
And it was like, if we're doing this in a sci-fi convention, you bet your ass I'm going to put in a Buffy shout out. Yeah.
And then the book club gets together. Like, we'll actually talk about the scene we were just talking about when he shows up and he's all sweaty. And Prudy is there. And one of the other kind of unrealistic things about this is that Emily Blunt / who plays Prudy, is very good at doing annoying characters and stick up their butt constipated like characters, and that's how they made Prudy. And she is such a total dick. And yeah. Allegra literally almost walks out of the book club because of it. But
she and Allegra don't get along throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, no, but everybody else is like, no, stay. And I'm like, dudes,
why?
Yeah, she's such a dick. But like one of the things, she keeps speaking French just like in the book, but one of the things is like Allegra's like making jewelry, and she's like, oh, what kind of jewelry do you like, Prudy? And Prudy's like, oh, I was the only child of a woman in a commune, so I hate all those hippie handicrafts. And it's just a big F-U to Allegra, who's like sitting right there. And Allegra's like, I'll be, like, but that's.
She really was completely socially toned. They make her very socially toned. I have a lot of problems with Prudy's, as she's written for the film, as I'm sure most people do. I will say, however, that Emily Blunt is such a great actress that she still finds the pathos in that character.
Yes.
And when she's having like her meltdown after her mother passes and her responses to things, you still feel for her.
I completely agree. And that was a really powerful scene after her mother dies, when she fights with Dean. And even when the actress is with that high school boy, because
they took way further. They took that way further in the movie.
Yeah, they really did. They're like constantly flirting, and she helps him. What I love. They make out. What I love is that, and I even wrote in my notes, Mansfield Park is back, baby. Because what I love is that she runs lines with him, because he's in the school play, Brigadoon, and she runs lines with him, and they get sexy through that. So I'm like, yeah, Mansfield Park, they actually use that, I shouldn't say a gimmick, but that convention there, and not a convention, but you know what I mean. They took that element.
They used
from
that aspect of the plot. Yeah.
And I loved that. I was like so glad that they did that. I thought it was so clever. And you're right. When she gets seduced by this younger guy, it's very believable to see why she lets herself walk the line and walk up to that edge, and then actually does kiss him, and then immediately pulls away and says, "We shouldn't be doing this."
Fun fact: Emily Blunt is actually only a year older than that actor.
Oh my God. So it's like a flip.
High school student.
It's like a flipped thing where normally the like younger women play, like it's just almost like a gender flip thing.
So, but here's like, he's supposed to be just turned 18, and she's probably supposed to be like 25, 26, something like that. But that actor who's playing the high school student is only a year younger than Emily Blunt in real life.
Yeah, that's okay. And I mean,
so it's like, we'll just pretend that because that guy doesn't look like he's 30. We'll just pretend that he's 18. Yeah, sure. Okay.
He was a reasonably convincing high school student for the movies.
They should have got, I wonder how old Oh God, what's his name? The guy from the High School Musical movies who's now hot as hell. What is his name?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Faye. Faye. What's the name of that actor who's in the High School Musical movies, who's in the new Baywatch movie now, who's really hot? He's thinking. You have to edit this out.
Zac Efron?
Yeah, Zac Efron. Oh man, they should have had Zac Efron. He was probably 10.
Yeah, maybe
he was probably 10 in 2007. But I think that's what they were going for, you know, that like
yes.
all of me. And also I had made a reference that to me he was full on Jordan Cataloning her. And of course Kristen didn't get that reference because she never watched my So-Called Life, which is shocking. But that kid was definitely putting out like a Jordan Catalano vibe. Those people who have watched My So-Called Life with Claire Danes, one of the best television dramas of all time, will understand what I'm saying.
Well, it was only one season long. I mean,
it was one perfect season. I own it. We're going to watch it. You know what? When you come in September, maybe I'll make you watch some of it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've been told unequivocally that this is going to happen, so I'm just accepting my destiny at this point.
It's different fighting it.
Yeah, it just seemed like such an, angsty, like it wasn't for me. Like I wasn't.
But it is. But it's also, I know this isn't a My So-Called Life podcast, but I will tell you, if you have any memory of what it was like to be in high school at all, this show is going to be so real to you that it's going to be sometimes painful to watch.
Like it says in this movie, like Prudy says, high school is never over. And
yeah.
I'm not sure.
High school's over. Sure. High school's never over. I mean, to some extent, that's not really true. But to some extent, it is, I guess, for some people.
For Prudy, certainly. Because she's never got out from under her inferiority complex, which is why she's always having to speak French and set herself apart and above.
What did you think about actually introducing her mother as a character that we meet and see and interact with?
I think it's supposed to increase the pathos of Prudy and for us to feel sorry for her because you're like,
and then you understand why she is such a tight ass,
she's
right?
really effed up. Yeah, and why she's such a tight ass. Yeah, exactly, because she's had to react to this incredible chaos that is her mother, who's just lights up a marijuana cigarette at the airport.
It actually, it really backfires, I think, because her mother does not come across as like a free spirit, pot smoking hippie. Her mother comes across as having dementia.
Oh yeah,
her mother almost burns the house. Like could have easily started a fire. Like Prudy walks in the house, it's full of smoke because her mother made something and left it in the oven. She's like put hot pans on the carpet.
Well,
her mother doesn't come across as like being drug addicted or whatever.
No, she's supposed to be a stoner. Like she's supposed to be a half-baked stoner all the time. But
it doesn't come across that way. It comes across as this woman cannot live on her own. She has dementia. She needs to be in a home. And then Prudy is, to me anyway. And then Prudy's like, "Get out! You're out of here." I'm like, you need to go with her and get her help.
Some people just can't be helped. Some people don't even want help. And the other thing is that but you're right though, Maggie. You're absolutely right because when she dies, it's obviously because she's been driving stoned, right?
Yeah, they're like she pulled out into traffic.
Which is something that Prudy should have known that she was a danger to other people and probably trying to do something about.
There are ways you can show her mother as a stoner and like just have her forget to pick her up and have her come home and have her be totally stoned. You don't need to have her like be a fire hazard in multiple ways and things that are clearly unsafe for her health, because then when Prudy just ships her off and she ends up dying, like as an audience, you can't help but feel that Prudy is not responsible but had a duty to get her mother help. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I understand that the point though is to show like this is why she is such a tight ass. This is why she's so straight laced, because her mother was the opposite. There was no structure. Everything was a lie. I liked how they did that thing where Prudy explains about the lies her mother would tell her.
Yes, and that's when she kisses the guy. She opens up and she's like, "My mother used to lie to me and say that things had happened when they hadn't. Say I had a big birthday party when I just hadn't." And he finds that so sad, and she's so broken. And then they kiss, and that was a nice moment. And that's when Dean comes to tell Prudy that her mother has died. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. So I wanted to talk, if we could segue I wanted to talk about each of the discussions, like each of the book clubs that they had. And one of the first ones that they have is Emma, which of course, this is where we hear, "Oh, Jocelyn, you're such an Emma," because obviously,
like, bam, theme of the movie. Thank you, Bernadette. But for now, Bernadette will announce the theme of the movie at every discussion, right?
And and Maggie were saying that a lot of the discussion is unsatisfying, or you don't necessarily agree with it. But there was something said in this book club discussion that I didn't even pull out or think of as useful or interesting until the third time I watched this movie. But when they're talking about Emma, they make the same complaint you and I had, which is like, you don't feel the sexuality, the attraction, the sexual attraction between Emma and Knightley.
Right.
But they're talking about the love affair, and basically Jocelyn comes out and says, look, when Emma falls in love with Knightley, or realizes she's in love with Knightley, that's when all of her sort of childish preoccupations and wild fantasies fall away. And love in that story is an act of sanity. Love makes their world more sane instead of being, this crazy love. And
love is the stabilizing force, not the destabilizing force.
Yes. And that's when they do the Grigg smackdown as well. I was really pleased that they kept that in.
Yeah.
He's like, what about the sense of menace? And Prudy's like, that's the whole point. It's fake, Greg. It's supposed to be a figment of our imagination. And they talk about, like, did we scare him away? Because like these discussions get very intense, but he starts to hold his own. During the Mansfield Park discussion, he does whip out these index cards, and
that was so cute.
It was so cute. And this is not in the book. He starts talking about how Mansfield Park is like The Empire Strikes Back in reverse.
Yes, that was really cute.
Because the two cousins,
Luke gets over Leia once he finds out she's his sister, but in Mansfield Park they fall in love, like, knowing that they're first guests. It was very cute.
It was so cute.
Hugh Dancy is very charming too. So he takes that character, and he's so likable. But again, there's so many things from the book that I really miss with him too. Like they show him emailing his older sisters, but you don't really understand the depth of their connection, I think, so much. And I just found myself missing stuff like that, because his older sisters just sounded so rad.
I think that they made a good decision to turn him into like a Silicon Valley, like rich guy or whatever.
Yeah, he's like, I just pointed to a house and bought it because I needed a house. It blows their mind.
He's such a dork and so socially weirdly, kind of.
He's just kind of clueless. Yeah, it's clear that he doesn't.
That's an archetype that we know. And when we first get introduced to Jocelyn, I mean, they're so different, and the difference in their ages, I'm really glad that they kept that in and that it is pronounced. I mean, Jocelyn really is a lot older than she's still beautiful. I mean, she's a gorgeous woman.
Maria Bello plays Jocelyn, and she's probably in her mid-40s in this movie, right?
Yeah. I'm sure at least, yeah. She's a beautiful woman, but there's obviously a 10-year age difference or more between them, and they didn't shy away from that, which I appreciated. So we'll just move on to the Mansfield Park discussion, which for me, the book does not include a Mansfield Park book club because that's when Prudy's mom dies. And so I am so glad that they kept one in, thank God, because, Mansfield Park. So we can talk about the fact that Sylvia is clearly the Fanny Price. And what happens is that she has her sort of cross to bear with having been divorced from Daniel. A number of things in the lead up to the meeting make her more emotional. The first thing is she bumps into Daniel at a Whole Foods, and he's dressed very preppy, which, okay, so my mom and dad split up, and so there are some things in here I could totally relate to, like you change you do like a makeover kind of thing when you get divorced.
Well, she did too, and that's her response to seeing him, I think.
She calls Jocelyn later, and she was like, he was wearing a sweater with a zipper. He was wearing one of those half pullover sweaters with the zipper.
Wasn't the woman he was dating wearing a tennis? Like they had come from the club or something. Like they're playing tennis or something like that.
And they're so preppy, and I totally had a reaction when I first watched that scene because was so like, would have been like her, like, oh my God, he's changed, he's happier, he's got, you know, like he's classier now, and he's away from me. And, you know, I totally would have, I see the emotional impact. And then the other thing is, he comes by her house where she's living now alone, and he tries to, I mean, it was their house together, but he tries to mow the lawn, and she's like, get the F out of here. She's like, you don't live here anymore. But he
does that in the book, doesn't he? He like shows up to try to fix stuff.
Yeah, he's like, I'm coming by to fix the shower. And that's in the book, she actually says, fuck you, and hangs up the phone.
Yeah.
Which in this, she comes out in her like little robe, and she's like, get out of here. I will pay someone to mow the lawn. This is not your house anymore. Blah, blah. You can't do the things a husband does anymore. But this is our first inkling that he's sort of missing his marriage. But she doesn't, you know, she just feels very like violated. She's like, I'm trying to exhume your ghost. And my dad also came by to mow the lawn after he had peaced out. And that's a complicated story. I'm not trying to say like it was one person or the other, but what I am saying is that it was very weird. Like he came in afterwards and like had a bowl of cereal, and I was like, oh, this is weird.
I think it was good to include that too, because you want to show Sylvia, like Sylvia spends maybe half the movie just like crying all the time.
Yeah.
So you need to show her, she says, I think I'm at the point where I'm angry with him now. You know, like you need to show her have that backbone.
Having that backbone, But yeah, Sylvia is clearly the Fanny Price. So when they all get together and they have this Mansfield Park discussion, Allegra is crapping all over Fanny Price. It's just like, oh, she's such a goody two-shoes. And, you know, Prudy is offended, and then everybody, you know, but Sylvia is the one who, and I'm going to insert the clip in here actually, because it was cathartic for me, but Sylvia goes off and she's like, Fanny Price was the rock. She supported her family. She was decent and loyal and hard.
He was the Horton.
Yeah, Horton. She's Horton hatches the egg. Exactly. And it's this passionate.
I thought that was nice. I liked that.
Yes. The only thing about that bothered me about all that is they keep mispronouncing Mariah. They keep saying a Maria.
Yeah.
I think that was intentional.
You know, Kristen, nobody's perfect. I also wonder, maybe one of the writers is a big a Mansfield Park fan, because they've included a discussion. They gave a really impassioned speech in favor of Fanny Price. I wonder if one of the people who adapted the book for a movie was like a big Mansfield Park fan and wanted to make sure that Fanny and the book kind of got its due.
If that was true, I think they would have gone nuts hearing everybody say Maria instead of Mariah. But I think it's possible. And, you know, because you're absolutely right. Mansfield Park is not that like commercially beloved. So to purposefully add that in when it's not in the book is a surprising thing. I mean, I think it serves a point in the story, but also I think it's entirely possible that they had someone in Mansfield Park's corner going, yeah, we have to add it, right?
Yeah. It's called the Jane Austen Book Club. If we don't talk about all the books, you know we're going to hear it.
Yeah, well, yeah, also that, like fan service or whatever, like, but, you know, a lot of Austen fans are down on it too. But the other thing I wanted to say is that they also did a call out to the fact that every time you read the book, you feel differently about Fanny and Henry Crawford. And Bernadette actually says, just once, I'd like to pick up this book and see Fanny in the sack with Henry Crawford. And I think there would be some satisfaction to that. And so they put their finger on that aspect of the book as well, which I think was great and good that they did that. And they pulled out the sexiness of it at Mansfield Park. So it was a good discussion overall, I thought. Yeah, and so in the meantime, what's happening between Grigg and Jocelyn is that Jocelyn keeps pushing Grigg. Jocelyn has invited Grigg to the book club for Sylvia, to give Sylvia like a fling in the sack with the younger man. So she keeps pushing Grigg to go out with Sylvia, and all the time she's feeling these feelings but unwilling to acknowledge them. She actually might be attracted to Grigg. And so that's when they wind up at the Northanger Abbey part of the story, where Grigg in his gross subdivision, you live in that development, that, you know, like
they do come across as very snobby.
Yeah, Jocelyn especially is just like, development.
And she's always in these like beautifully hand knitted Irish wool sweaters and these like large Native American pattern wraps and things like that. You're like, oh, whatever, Jocelyn.
I love her big coat. One of the things I like about movies is when costume designers and continuity people, they put characters in the same outfit for more than one scene.
Yeah, I agree. That's how real people are. Like, I wear the same pants like 4 days in a row.
Yeah, my favorite thing that I'm always wearing, my favorite shirt or whatever. Jocelyn has this massive, almost like a blanket / coat that she's wearing in a lot of scenes. It's this was like a gold, black, and white printed like animal print thing, and she's always wearing it, and it's really cute, but it's definitely quirky.
Well, they definitely did. I mean, they did. I think the costuming in this was really good too. I mean, look at Prudy, right? She's got that kind of unflattering but very like French-esque bob, and all of her clothes are like tight, high-necked. Yeah. Sometimes they'll have like a bit of sheer so you can actually see some skin, but she's very like buttoned up, like very literally buttoned up.
I found myself wondering where Prudy shops in this movie, because I would actually like to buy her more things like that, but I don't know where you would ever even find.
Probably, I think you could find stuff like that at like Ann Taylor.
Yeah, she just have like a very
Talbot's. Oh no, she goes to like Talbot's. Or Lord and Taylor.
She doesn't wear a lot of cardigans though. It's this very specific, like
maybe like Lord and Taylor. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it like a department store, a high-end department store, but not Bloomingdale's.
Give me fashion advice, Maggie. Yeah. But yeah, so they wind up going to his house for Northanger Abbey, and this was very cute. And one of the things I remembered from the original viewing of the movie is that when they show up at his house, this is very cute. He has this sort of antechamber to his home. He has one of those like super high ceilings.
Chamber.
Yeah, he has
entry hall. It's
entry hall. Well, he has one of those super high ceilinged, it's one of those McMansions that you come in and it has a super high ceiling in the staircase or whatever. And he has tricked it all out with Halloween stuff and on timers. And so they come in and it's like being in a haunted house, and which is very cute. But then Sylvia starts freaking out, which is exactly what I would do, because I'm always terrified by haunted houses. And he has to stop it and be like, it's okay, it's okay. And then they like hug and he has to like take care of her. And they develop this chemistry where he's like, oh, I read The Mysteries of Udolpho. And she's like blown away by the fact that he did that. Which
I read The Mysteries of Udolpho. So
yeah, I read The Monk, which is
maybe that's the one I read. I can't remember.
You probably read Udolpho. I mean, I read The Monk. Let me go on a brief digression. The Monk is a very weird book to read. Not a lot of people who read Northanger Abbey feel the need to read it. I was talking to my father-in-law, Kevin's stepfather, who when I was living in the DC area, and he did too. And he went to a lot of Smithsonian night kind of things. And he turned to me, we were having dinner. He's like, Kristen, we're still going to that thing on Wednesday, right? And I'm like, oh yeah. Cause I must have said yes to it, but then forgot about it. He's like, The Monk. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'll read The Monk, right? But I was thinking in my head. So I go and I was like, well, there must be some Jane Austen thing where they're reading The Monk, and he knows I love Jane Austen. So he's taking me to this thing. So I read The Monk, and then we show up at the Smithsonian, we go to the hall, and it's a talk on Edvard Munch, painter of the Scream fame. And so I read this ridiculous Gothic romance, which I'm actually glad, because it gave me a taste of the flavor of what Jane Austen's talking about. But yeah.
Is the Monk the one that has the like 200-page story about some guy traveling at night and they get robbed, but it has nothing to do with the main plot?
No, it has to do with a monk who...
I must have read Mysteries of Udolpho then.
Who gets real sexy. And
I do remember that part in Northanger Abbey though, where she's like, typically in this type of novel, I will not bore the reader by recounting a tangent story that does not relate. And I very much appreciated that bit of satire, because that was one of the things that drove me crazy reading those type of books.
Yeah. And so anyway, Sylvia is like, oh, you're...
Hello?
Sylvia, by the way, has gotten all sexy right now. She's had her makeover, so she's her beautiful. She's straightened her curly hair, which is supposed to make people more beautiful. Yeah, she's lost the glasses, which, as you all know, that's when we find out that the ugly girl has been hot all along.
That's movie speak for got pretty, right?
Yeah, and she's wearing a low cut.
You don't have crazy curly hair when you have straight sleek hair.
Yeah, so then Jocelyn starts to get jealous, and turns
into a total bitch.
Then Pride and Prejudice happens, which happens at a library dinner, right? So Sylvia works at the state library. They have a big benefit dinner and dancing at the library, and Daniel's going to show up and be there, which makes the stakes really high when Grigg picks up Jocelyn, and then they're going to be really late. And so this is when Jocelyn and Grigg have their big Pride and Prejudice blow-up moment, where he is like, hey, how'd you like that Ursula Le Guin? Because, of course, all through the movie, he's still asking her, have you read the Le Guin? I recommended the science fiction. And she's like, I prefer to read books about real people. She's pissed off at him. He's driving too slowly. And so it's this Pride and Prejudice blow-up that they have, which I thought was great. And he accuses her of trying to meddle in other people's lives, but not, like be present in her own. And she's like, if wanting my friend to be happy means I'm meddling, then I hope I never stop meddling. And it was sort of an impassioned defense of her Emma-ness, right? And so they just have this great blow up. I'm trying to look at my notes to see what else that they say to each other.
I remember in our discussion about the book, we talked about how Grigg was really ridiculous, showing up with a filthy car and running out of gas and all of this stuff. And we were totally on Jocelyn's side on that one. But in the movie, I felt opposite, where they just made her be so unrelentlessly bitchy because she's really jealous.
Yeah.
That I just felt it was just you're just like, stop beating up on Grigg. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. He's so cute and he's so sweet and he wants to.
Right? Exactly. And so it just comes off as her just being, and it's because she's jealous. And so then it almost even discounts the things that he do that are legitimately like messed
annoying,
up that night.
Obnoxious. Yeah.
But she just is so rude to him from the very beginning.
Yeah. Yeah. And he basically says, you're closed to new ideas and you're closed off to me. And then they have this sort of hate dance where they finally arrive and then he dances with her on the dance floor, and he's a great dancer, but it's sort of sexy, but it's also like sort of tension, which is a very Pride and Prejudice thing to do. And that really worked for me. I mean, that it really did.
Yeah.
And this is the same dinner where Allegra shows up having just dumped Corinne. Right. So we all remember why that happens, right?
Yeah. And I thought they did a good job with that too, actually.
Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you again. Yeah.
Okay. I thought they did a good job with that, where they have her tell the story about the little boy at her elementary school. And then she finds a letter that's supposedly from an editor. But the way the letter was written was just like
mean.
It was not the type of, you would get a form letter back.
Yes, no one would get a rejection letter with that type of detailed feedback. And the feedback was like, yeah, this story was cruel and unkind. And that story we felt really unbelievable. Who would believe a self-centered lesbian skydiving? And
it was, I know they wanted to make it clear that she was taking Allegra's stories, but they could have just said the titles of the works and it would have been
enough. Yeah, it would have been fine.
And then Allegra shows up and it's just like bonkers off the wall upset.
Yeah. And that's when Sylvia is like, you don't just throw people away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's trying to impose her new philosophy of like not letting go and not walking away. And Allegra calls BS on it. And he's like, no. She's like, no, I dumped the bitch or whatever, which is an actual line from the movie. And meanwhile, Prudy is back at the table, the library table, also being absolutely horrible to Dean. This is an evening of
trying.
Women being, he was trying. Dean was such a meathead and obviously such a, bad at being a husband. But in this scene, they have him show up and try to really try. And that's when you just start to really feel for him and feel like maybe, I guess, they could be back together. But he's still so awkward at it. Like,
I think the big problem is with Dean is they set the bar so low in that first scene. He moves upwards in terms of you're liking him as a character throughout the rest of the movie. Basically, every other scene he's in, I think that he's a pretty decent human being. And when she's freaking out in their hotel room, I think he actually comes across very well. But that they just made him so awful in that first scene with them together. You kind of never really forgive him for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, how did these two people have no common ground at all? They have,
and then she is just awful at the, Dean thinks that Austen is the capital of Texas.
Yeah. Yeah. And to be fair, her mother has just died and she's really drunk and having a breakdown. And did you notice, by the way, that she has a breakdown? She flees sobbing to the ladies' room, and it's Allegra who goes after her.
I think it's because they're the closest in age. Maybe.
Well,
and because Allegra herself had just been so upset.
They sort of bonded. I mean, that's sort of when you realize the book club has sort of brought them together in sympathy for each other.
And they kind of hated each other on sight.
Yeah.
At the first meeting.
Yeah. Well, when you think about it, Marianne and Fanny Price would definitely hate each other.
So
it's almost like they're trying to play off that. And it's Allegra that has this sort of accident which puts her in the hospital. And the next thing that happens is that she falls off a climbing wall and hits her head. And Sylvia and Daniel meet up at the hospital. And this is what makes me really hate him, is that they're there together and he's talking about, isn't this nice that we're all together as a family again?
It feels so normal.
And I was
like,
the
bump on her head.
I was like, shut up, Daniel. Right. You left. You're the one who left. I became you, Maggie, in watching this movie. Is that every subsequent scene with Daniel, I really hate him. And I feel like I'm like, you left. Stop sniffing around, Sylvia. And then
I found him to be very selfish. For me, that character, and I mean, Jimmy Spitz did a great job, like you pointed out. He's a really great actor. He became president of the United States in The West Wing, and I'm cool with that. I have a problem with Daniel, the same problem I did in the book, is that he represents everything for me that midlife crisis, selfish bullshit that I have no patience for.
Yeah.
Like, he breaks up the marriage, he nukes their lives, and then he realizes he misses her and he wants to come back, and he was so wrong. It's just that he's a man and didn't feel appreciated or special. And it's just like,
if he had been really
yourself and saying that'll be me, and like that can be you, and you'll be on your own.
Yeah,
because I don't put up with that shit.
Right. Well, if he had been truly contrite at the end when he shows up for the Persuasion meeting, if he had been really contrite, it would be different. But he really wasn't. He just rolls up and he's like, "Hey, I read this book. I'm
wearing a flowy shirt because we're at the beach and I brought this book."
And Sylvia's like, whatever, you can stay. But anyway, in the scene in the hospital, she's like, I'm a new woman, Daniel. And he's like, I can see that. I can really see that. And what he's talking about is that she looks great. Oh, yeah.
I find him very emotionally manipulative.
Yes. I find him, I didn't like that. I didn't like the way he spoke to her at the hospital. He was clearly trying to insinuate himself. But what she says, though, is illuminating. She's like, remember, so at the beginning, at the first meeting at the coffee shop, she looks up and they've written a cute little quote of the day, and it's loving means letting go. Mm-hmm. And she says at the scene at the hospital, she's like, letting go has taught me a lot. And you realize she's moved on, and she's like, oh, and she's
just such a cooler person on her own that's one of also the real tragedies of the story for me, is when she ends up with him.
Well, she's still a cool person, and they've both sort of learned something from their little adventure, but
that was an expensive adventure.
Yeah, really. Really. And that's on them.
It's a lot of lawyers for an adventure.
Yeah, it is. So, but they also have their Sense and Sensibility meeting. They have it in the hospital. And Jocelyn even says to Bernadette beforehand, she's like, if Greg starts making a lot of little comments, I'm out of here. And what's satisfying about this Sense and Sensibility meeting is that Greg and Jocelyn trade a ton of barbs, which are great. So what they start talking about at the Sense and Sensibility book club is why Colonel Brandon didn't make a pass or wasn't interested romantically in Mrs. Dashwood, the mother of the two girls.
Yeah, what about Mrs. Dashwood?
which is not a line of critical analysis that many people follow, and I think there's
it never even occurred to me.
No,
because once you're over 30, you have no sexual appeal and no you don't exist basically as a person anymore.
Well, that's exactly what they said in the movie, except for they said 25, which is wrong because Anne Elliot, I believe, is 27 in Persuasion.
Yeah.
So that was an incorrect thing for them to even say. But they're like, oh, after you're 25, nothing interesting could possibly happen in your life, according to Austen. But that was just true in her day. I mean, you wouldn't marry an older lady. I mean, that's why they object to Reginald de Courcy marrying Lady Susan, is like she doesn't have that many childbearing age years left of, or you know,
if it's okay for like a 60-year-old naval guy to marry a 18-year-old, like just by course, that's normal. Why would you marry like a widowed 48-year-old? You know, that's just not going to happen.
Yeah. But of course they're using this Brandon and, you know, the older Mrs. Dashwood as a stand-in to Jocelyn for being like the older woman in the relationship. So Greg says, like, maybe, you know, like, why wasn't Colonel, you know, they pose the question, how about Colonel Brandon and Mrs. Dashwood? And Greg was like, well, maybe Mrs. Dashwood wouldn't give him the time of day, which is a barb at Jocelyn. And then he complains that Brandon is a nice guy and women don't want nice guys. And Jocelyn gets,
oh my God, yes. Oh, it's so great.
Say it. Such a great dig in where she's like, well, I've noticed men who complain about that the loudest usually don't turn out to be all that nice.
Oh, yes. It was so great. That's that whole like nice guy syndrome thing, right?
Yeah. She's like,
where it's like, I'm the nice guy. I like you. You have to like me back. I deserve to have you like me back. And it's like, that's not a nice guy. That's called being an asshole.
She's like, Greg, take your fedora and go.
Yeah.
So
I was just so glad that someone calls in like a broader platform than just someone on the internet called out that whole nice guy idea, that the guys who are like, girls don't like nice guys. It's like, hey, maybe you're not a nice guy.
Yeah, exactly. And so they have this, that's how they use. So again, this is not like this super in-depth, insightful critique of Sense and Sensibility. However, they use the story to illustrate their, you know, to trade barbs or to make points, you know, for their own aims. And
let's say that we appreciate how the film's use of the book discussions furthers the plot and relationship of the characters.
Yeah. And it's nice to know that they actually did read the book and are talking about actual plot elements of the books, which, you know, is great to have in any movie or to be exposed to in any way.
I have to admit that I did, despite the fact that it happened 6 times, very much enjoy the minute-long montage of all the characters reading each of the books, just because I like seeing people read. So they would show, like, when we went to every new book, they would show like a quick montage of all the characters, what edition they were reading, where they were reading.
I loved how you could see the covers. You could see the covers of each different edition, which I really liked. And, you know, those are real books that we've all held in our hands. I mean, I recognize some of the editions they actually are reading. And I'm like, that's my book, you know? And
I really enjoyed I thought that was really cute. You know, Allegra would be reading in bed at night when her partner was asleep, or Prudy would sit there with like her perfect little cup of tea and her perfect little book reading. And I don't know, I thought it happens 6 times, but I still enjoyed it.
Yeah. It was cute. And well, and like I forgot to mention it, but when they're at that dinner and they're discussing Pride and Prejudice, there's another thing that they call out to the book where Prudy is talking about mothers and how mothers are time bombs and how mothers will basically, and then Bernadette's like, don't you think you're giving Mrs. Bennet a little too much credit?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess, you know, we all have this burden to bear. We have to get out from under our mothers, you know, so that's another.
How did you feel about Bernadette in the film? I felt like they kind of normalized her a bit.
They did make her more normal and less quirky. unless hit like weird floaty hippy dippy, like I'll do whatever, wear whatever.
Well, it was almost like because they made Prudy's mother so crazy, they had to dial back Bernadette, or Bernadette would just seem like Prudy's mom.
Yes, one more mother. And at that dinner, they did keep all her her marital history in, because at that dinner, she says about Pride and Prejudice. They're talking about Pride and Prejudice, and she goes, "Well, I've had every marriage in this book." Which is a hysterical line.
That was really cute.
And she does seem wise. I mean, Bernadette is always the shoulder that people are crying on, especially Prudy. When Prudy,
well, she's kind of the only one that can stand her, at least in the beginning.
Yes, well, and Prudy admits, like, I'm thinking about sleeping with one of my students, this is a terrible line, and I actually noted it down in my notes how much I hated it, but Prudy's like, he looks at me like I'm a dish of ice cream. And
he's the spoon, and I'm the dish of ice cream.
Yeah.
And I like Bernadette's response, though, because I had the subtitles on, and her response is, exhales. When she said that, she just goes, and there's a lot, even I forget, I can look up the actress who played Bernadette. She's very good. But even in that response, there was a lot. She portrays a lot in that, like, I remember those days. That's tough. And there's also like, girl, you need to get it together. There was a lot that was conveyed with just that exhale. Kathy Baker, that's her name. I always have IMDb open when we're doing a movie discussion.
She does have a very middle-aged lady look to her, except at the end, she's really glammed up.
Well, she's in Picket Fences, which I don't know if you ever saw that show, Picket Fences, but that's just kind of like her deal. She does play the kind of wise world, not weary, but like the wise woman who's lived in the world and is provide guidance to younger, foolish women.
Has this empathy. She has a lot of empathy. You feel like she's empathetic. Yeah. Although in the first scene we meet her, she just monologues and talks about how men just monologue. Yeah.
I'm glad they kept that. They won't let you get a word in edgewise. And then Prudy goes, well, I think, but that's, blah, blah, blah. And then she talks right over her. That's from the book. And I was glad they kept that in.
Yes. And so our final book then becomes Persuasion, where Prudy is very, very close to sleeping with her young, sexy man from high school.
I mean, that guy is hot. That kid was hot. But for fuck's sake, you're a teacher. Like, I don't, this,
well, she doesn't go through with it.
Problematic. Prudy is just it's hard to like her when she does things that are so monumentally stupid.
Oh, yeah. Well, right? I mean, but that's the point. Like, you are rooting for her not to make this stupid mistake, and then she doesn't. But to the point about him being so hot, in the scene where they're getting together for the first time at that coffee shop, he stops by and taps on the window to say hi to Prudy. And he's so good looking that when he walks away, Johnson actually leaps up to watch him walk away and bonks her head on the window.
I loved that because I've done that before. Not necessarily to look after a guy, but I've definitely leaned forward to look at something out of the window and hit my head on the glass. This happened to me multiple times. And so I very much appreciated that detail because it's like, oh, yeah, that happens.
Yeah, it was so cute. So she tells Dean. Dean is in a cutoff shirt with no sleeves, like playing video games at the house. And she comes in with her. It's very weird because she's wearing like a seaside like outfit. She's got like a wrap on and whatever. And she's like, "Oh, Dean, I'm going to the shore because we're doing Persuasion." And she leaves. And he's like, "Whatever, you're stupid."
Oh, he was working on the car for that scene or something, like doing something very manly.
Oh yeah, that's right. The first time he's working on the car doing some manly, and she leaves.
Yeah.
Then she pulls over in her and changes from her conservative beachy looking thing to like a strapless dress. And I'm like, you probably just could have worn this strapless dress. I mean,
the guy, he's not gonna. If you just show some skin, like, I don't know. I mean, the point was to show that she was deceived. She was engaged in deception.
Yes. Yeah. And so she goes, and this is the moment where she realizes, oh, I shouldn't be sleeping with my student. She goes to meet the guy, and she's trying to cross the street. And Amy Mann's "Save Me" is playing, which is a good song. But anyway, she's waiting to cross the street, and it changes from "don't walk" to "walk." But she doesn't start crossing. Instead, she looks at the signal that's changed from "walk," and it says, "What would Jane do? What?
Because they talk about that. What was the book they talk about it? How Jane Austen, they have a discussion about whether the books could be a guide for morality.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's the other thing. Oh, I didn't even write it down, but I have it in my notes. So when they're talking about Sense and Sensibility, Jocelyn says Austen is always on the side of order. She's always on the side of order rather than chaos and in love. And Grig goes, so you're saying this is a rule book?
Yeah.
And he's pissed off. He's like, you're saying this is a rule book? And she's like, yeah. And that's exactly like we said, the Eleanor playbook. I mean, it's a guide. There are guiding ideals in it. And that's what happens to Prudy. She says, what would Jane do? And it stops her from having an affair. And she doesn't cross the street because the flashing signal. So I have to say, while I appreciate that they're using Austen as a everyday practical morality, which is definitely what it has been for me, having it flash on a street sign signal is so cheesy. And really, the first time I saw this movie, I was like, okay, this is the dumbest movie ever. Like,
I think again that's something to do with the form of storytelling we're using. In a book, you can have the character think internally.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But for a film, we need to somehow show Prudy is questioning this decision, not because of something internal to her, but because she's thinking about the discussions they've had about Jane Austen.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do we show that Prudy is making this decision based on Jane Austen? We have to have it reflected on some kind of external visual medium for the audience.
Yes. I'm with you. Actually, you're right. That there's no easy way to do that, and they kind of did it.
Yeah, this is why people in movies and television shows always have way more hallucinations than people in real life, right? Like they're constantly hallucinating shit, reading things wrong, hearing people say things, having these elaborate daydream fantasies, because we have to tell the audience what they're feeling internally in an external manner.
You're so right. I mean, there has to be some kind of way to share that.
Having said that, it was super cheesy.
Said that, yeah.
Even the walk, don't walk itself was just like, I see what you're doing, and it's really obvious.
And so she doesn't. It doesn't show what she does. I assume she's like tells the kid, like, sorry, kid. But then she goes back.
I don't think she even crosses the street. I don't think she ever crosses the street. He sees her.
Yeah.
Waiting to cross the street. And I think she probably just looks at him and turns away and walks away, and that's what happens.
Well, she should have given him some sign like, no, I decided not to do this, but
she probably like waves like, sorry.
Like, sorry. But anyway,
sorry, I decided not to break the law and sleep with you. He may be 18, but he's still her student.
Yeah, and that would be bad. So we're all glad she didn't do that, because Jane asked her, what would you do? And it's like, you're married. That's your, you've gotten up in front of everybody and sworn vows, and you have an obligation to try to fix it.
Yeah, if only Daniel had if only Daniel had read Austen earlier.
Well, yeah, right, And so she goes back to Dean. And this is another thing that actually really bothered Kevin. Like, I'm so, like, I shouldn't say proud, but I'm so impressed, I guess I should say, by Kevin, and his actual knowledge of Austen is actually very good. And
it's because he listens to the podcast.
Probably. But he was watching it with me. So what happens is Prudy goes home. She's holding her copy of Persuasion in her little cute dress, and she goes in, and Dean's in his cutoff shirt playing video games.
And she's crying.
She's crying, and she walks in and she says, I want you to read this. And he's like, I'm not going to, I'm not going to read this.
Well,
and
okay, go say what you're going to say.
He goes, this is a test, isn't it? She goes, it's not a test. She's like, it's about two people who used to love each other and they don't anymore, and it's about how they persuade themselves to love each other again. And later the night, and I was like thinking to myself, like, that's not what Persuasion is. Like, that's not the plot. And later when we were falling asleep, we're in bed, and Kevin goes, hey, and I'm like, what? And he's like, that's not the plot of Persuasion. It's like, I love that it's been bothering you all this time.
I really disliked that scene too, because his response to it felt really real to me as well. He's like, I'm not a reader.
I can't do this.
This feels like a test. I'm going to fail. It's like, if someone walks in without any prompting, hands you a book, and is like, if you want to save our marriage, you have to read this book, this entire book right now. And she's like, what?
It's a little unfair to him. But then she's like sobbing and she's like starts reading it. And he's like, you're not going to read the whole thing aloud. He's like, fine, one page. But the thing is, the start of Persuasion is not romantic. So there she is.
It's like the
pathos. And she starts talking about Sir Walter and the baronetage. And I'm like, this is
Let's be honest. A lot of Austen's books are not like first page gonna grab you. They tend to like Mansfield Park. It tells like the history of. Does it tell the history of the family or something like that?
Miss Maria Ward of Huntington.
Yeah, they're not like I'm so interested, except for obviously Pride and Prejudice, which has one of the best first lines in the history of English literature. Right. But you know, for the most part, they're not going to be like, ooh,
yeah, we're talking about a guy in a book.
Like the most romantic start.
Yeah, yeah.
But to his credit, he reads the whole book with her.
He listens to it enough to like get hooked, which is great considering the beginning of that book is not something that easily hooks the modern reader. But yeah, she's bawling and reading it, and it's supposed to be satirical and funny. But then when we cut back to them, as I said, he's learned to read. He's reading very articulately, and they read it together, and they're back in love because that's the power of Austen. I personally think that particular couple is very ill-matched, extremely ill-matched, but that's the story. We're supposed to accept that they've once upon a time loved each other and got married. So, hey. And so Prudy doesn't even show up for the Persuasion discussion, but you know who does show up on the beach where everybody is waiting? Daniel. And as we said, he rolls up. He's like, hey, I read this book. And Sylvia's like, whatever, I guess you can stay. But he's so entitled. You know, he's not.
That's my problem. Yes. That's my problem with this entire character. He feels entitled to this specific brand of happiness that he decides, whatever it is at that certain time, no matter how it affects everyone else.
Yes. And
does he ever see Sylvia as like an actual person?
Well, and that's not the way he is in the book. In the book, he is very afraid of being rejected, and he knows he should be rejected. But in the movie, he's not. And you know, he writes the letter to her, whatever. Like, I guess his explanation was good enough. But yeah, he never really has to suffer. She never turns the screws on him. He never
and despite showing her growing and becoming like such a stronger, more independent person, I think we talked about this when we talked about the book. To me, it just feels like such a step backwards for her character to just be like, oh, I love you, come back, you know?
Yeah. And then the other thing they do. So I mean, we have mixed feelings about it, but that's how their sort of storyline concludes. He shows up, then he writes her the letter, then they smooch, and then Allegra finds them smooching and is like, oh my God.
Well, she doesn't just find them smooching. I mean, they're about to
they're like making out. Yeah. But at the Persuasion thing, the other thing that happens is they do a cute thing to Jocelyn. They pull a Northanger Abbey where Greg shows up with a woman on his arm, and she's like, oh no, it's a woman. He brought a woman to the book club. And then when it's his sister, she's like, oh my God, thank God.
No, it's his sister. Come on. They have a whole thing where Bernadette knows two of his sisters. And so and they show him Ryan. I mean, the audience knows like he's not going to just show up with some rando lady.
Yeah, just like Catherine Morland in Northanger Abbey. She actually does not assume that it's a wife. She knows. She's like, from the simple proposition of having acknowledged that he had a sister, she realized it was probably a sister. But anyway, the sister takes Jocelyn aside and is like, look, you have to make the first move. So what Jocelyn does, and this made me cry this morning. Now, I don't know why this moves me so much, but we talked about it before when we talked about the book. She goes home and she finally reads Ursula.
Yeah, I loved it.
And she's up all night and she drives to his. She's so moved by it. She drives to his house. It's 5 a.m. She sleeps against the car window and he comes out in the morning.
She finished reading it at 2:21 in the morning.
Oh, you saw
that? They show her clock next to her when she closes the book and puts it down, and it's 2:21 in the morning.
Oh, and she waits for him outside his house, which she's so excited. And to me, that's sort of, it's a breakthrough in a way. It's her setting aside her pride and finally meeting him in the middle, finally acknowledging him as an intellectual equal, finally going to him. And I don't know, it made me cry when he comes out and he sees her there, and then she just can't stop talking about how much she loves it, and then they kiss, and it's really great.
That was one of my favorite parts of the book and the movie.
Yeah, me too. And she's wearing that
And then
coat.
she's wearing that coat, and it's super early morning. The sun is just coming up, and they show the paper guy driving by, and I couldn't help but think, like, what the hell does this paper guy think is going on? Like, it's so weird. They're making out in the middle of the street, and the paper guy is like driving around them to continue on his route.
When Prudy pulls over and changes clothes, there's like a little girl on a skateboard who's like staring at her like, you're having an affair, aren't you?
Yeah, like, this girl knows. Yeah. Everybody knows Prudy.
She knows.
Everybody knows.
And then everything's good. So all the storylines get tied up, and we fade to the very next year. It's at the library dinner, and Bernadette shows up with a very handsome man, and she says, oh, I'm working on my Spanish. He's working on his English, and I know mi esposo. And then everyone's like, oh my God, Bernadette got married. So it's kind of fun. And by the way, I could be wrong, but in the very beginning title sequence where she's at yoga and some guy like hits her in the face, it looks very similar to this guy. So I like to think in my head that that's tied it back to the credit sequence where she like gets married with this guy. And then
in the book, though, she's in, like you said, she's in Costa Rica or something.
Yeah, she goes to Costa Rica.
And she shows up looking like the most normal she's ever looked.
Oh, yeah, she's very glam. I mean, she's gotten her hairstyle, and she's sort of like Sylvia. She's like gotten all glammed out, and it's this black tie dinner. And then
Prudy bothered me.
Why did it bother you? Oh, because she had to make herself beautiful.
I just don't like this idea that, and you know what? I think part of what it is, at least with Bernadette, I see it as Bernadette is the type where she will just kind of like change.
Oh, yeah, she's very changeable. Yeah.
Yes, but to me, this idea that like you have to change who you are to make a man happy makes me really uncomfortable.
Well, she's sort of, I don't know.
But I think, like I said, I think with Bernadette, she is the type who will, not personalities, but her outer appearance to her is something that she's like a chameleon. Yeah. She can just like change at will. And this guy was clearly very dapper, right? He shows up, he's got like the tux scarf, like he's very dapper guy. So when she shows up with him, she wants to reflect that part of him, kind of.
You don't get the impression that she changed and then she got her man. You got the impression that they like fell in love, and then she may have just changed her outward appearance because she was feeling more glamorous. I don't know.
I do agree. Yes, I agree. It's a little like, oh wow, she looks completely different because she's with that guy.
And then Prudy and Dean. Prudy is pregnant. They're obviously saving.
That was very cute. They seemed very happy and cute.
They did. And Dean's like, and Dean's like, I bet he hasn't read any Austen at all. And then the guy,
the whole end was so cheesy.
And they're like, we're gonna have to teach it. We're gonna have to make him.
Oh, well, we'll fix that.
We'll fix that, right? Exactly. We'll be taking care of that. And then everybody raises their champagne flutes, and I'm sure the guy is like thinking, like, "Ay caramba!" Like, "Oh my god,
that's racist."
What? Now, Spanish? Come on, it's just Spanish.
Is Allegra? Is she there with someone? I can't remember. Because we know
she's with Dr. Yep.
So they changed that for her, because in the book she goes back to Corinne, which is some bullshit.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they have, because I really like Dr. Yep. Dr. Yep was cool.
Okay. Yeah, Doctor. I think she's with Dr. Yep. I know she.
I couldn't remember if she was at the dinner or not. I think she might have been there alone, and I couldn't remember.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Don't hold me to anything with that. I can't remember.
Yeah. But anyway, I think that's the end of our movie discussion. If you want to say anything else, otherwise we can move into the Wheat Chief.
I liked it. I would actually be interested to have Bayard watch it. I think that he would. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see his response, since you talked about Kevin's response to it. I would definitely file this one under the like chick flick category, which I hate to use, but I mean, come on, like the marketing of this was not going to be like, take your man to see this movie. Although I think that anyone who watches it would enjoy it and find value in it. I thought it was cute. I do prefer the book, but this was a very cute, very interesting movie.
Yeah,
cute is the word I would use. Like if someone said, "What'd you think?" I say, "It was cute."
It was cute. Yeah, I would say I never went back to this as like a fun, girls' night or just personal. I need a movie night kind of watch. But now that
it's a little heavy for that, actually. I think.
Well, now that I've rewatched it to this point and I feel like a kinship with it, I actually might do that now. So I may have actually grown into it a little bit.
I think for me, it's a little too, like, the emotions involved are there's a lot of crying.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
Prudy's mother dies and Sylvia's marriage falls apart. And there's a lot of, like, heavy stuff going on in this movie.
There is.
I wouldn't say it's a comedy.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think there are a lot of funny parts, though. I thought that the uplifting parts were more rewarding, and the discussion parts were very rewarding for me. So on the whole, I think it balances out. For whatever reason, the crying didn't upset me as much as movies. A lot of movies really upset me. I have to be very careful with what I watch nowadays.
Oh my God, yes. So let me tell a story. I remember maybe 4 years ago, we were talking about Game of Thrones, and Kristen says, Maggie, and I've read the books, and Kristen says, Maggie, Robb Stark is just my favorite character. If anything happens to him, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I remember telling Kristen before a certain episode happened, I emailed her and I was like, okay, girl, no spoilers, but you may want to prepare yourself before you watch the episode tonight. If you need to talk, feel free to call me. I'll be awake.
I think you told me once, after a certain character died on Downton Abbey, you turned to your mom and you guys both said, Kristen's not going to be able to handle this.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I don't want to, again, no spoil, even though it's been out for a while, no spoilers. Like, one of the main characters on Downton Abbey, my mom looked at me and said, oh my God, Kristen. We have to warn her. Because we both know how you get into things, and you're like, not that you're delicate, but just that you feel things so strongly. So when I know something like sad is going to happen, I feel like this responsibility.
Yeah.
You a heads up, or you'll torture yourself.
I've started taking that responsibility on myself, honestly. I'm really, and it's sad that I have to do this because I know I'm missing out on art.
No, but not if it's going to cause you actual emotional anguish.
Yeah. But,
this is just like me with the Olympics. I've discovered that I cannot stay up late watching like gymnastics on Olympics because then I won't sleep the rest of the night.
Oh,
because I'll be so keyed up and so like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. I have to just go to bed and watch it in the morning.
That's so funny. The things that get us riled up, that is so funny. I have to tell you too, this is a digression, but we were talking about Greg and all of the trash in his car.
That was really filthy.
When I got married, right, Kevin drove this Volvo 240. He had been driving it for years. It was a really old car, and he didn't keep it that clean. And so when we left, how the married couple drives away or whatever, I came out. He brought the car around. He got out. He opened the passenger door for me. I looked on the floor, and on the passenger side, it was like fast food wrappers.
And you're in your wedding dress?
Yeah, I was in my, I changed out of my wedding dress into some other pretty dress.
You're traveling honeymoon dress,
yes,
right?
Yes. And I got into this chariot
fast food
full of garbage.
If I was you, I would have been this better not be a metaphor for our married life.
Pick me up in your trash car.
He really didn't even bother to get his car fucking cleaned.
No.
There's the optics of this where you're it's like from the 1950s. You're in your beautiful travel suit, like women used to wear travel suits. Yeah. And you have your little vintage suitcase standing on the side of the road for your husband. And he pulls up and opens the door and you look down and it's just full of trash.
Yeah. I think it's even in one of the wedding pictures. You can see the trash. Classy. We're classy folk.
Oh, Kevin. Okay. All right. Yes, but that's it. Parting thoughts, final thoughts. This is a very cute movie. I did enjoy it. I prefer the book, but I mean, not everybody has time for a deep dive book. And this gets the job done. It's very cute. The relationships are well explored. It does some good linking of the characters and the plots to the Jane Austen. Do you think that do you think that watching this movie would encourage people to read Jane Austen?
You know what? I would say yes. Honestly,
I think so too.
If you were forced to watch this, but you didn't know anything about Jane Austen, I think you would come out very curious.
I'm sure there's a lot of high school girls who watch this movie and then we're like, you know what? I'm going to read the Jane Austen.
Yeah. Maybe they had only seen Pride and Prejudice or something.
Yeah. Let's see what all the fuss is about.
Yeah. or a couple other movies. Yeah.
Do you think that the movie is appropriately, I guess, like reverential to Jane Austen? It's very clear. No one ever shits on Jane Austen, right?
Right.
They always hold her up with respect and discuss her work seriously, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. I don't think that I would be watching this movie if it had a whole lot of critique of the negative critique of Jane Austen in it.
Yeah.
So.
Now, Grigg does, when he and Jocelyn are fighting, he does say, when she has never read, the Ursula Le Guin, he's like, I read those girly books that you suggested. Yeah. And then she gets like, her hackles go up, and then he finishes and says, and you call them that? And then he says, yes, only because I had never read them.
Yeah.
Or like, and then he says something like, I read them and I learned that was wrong.
Yep.
So and I was the same way watching it. As soon as he said that, I was like, oh, nope, he didn't. And then his next line, he kind of resolved that for me.
There's a lot out there that, you might not understand, and you shouldn't judge. You shouldn't be so proud and prejudiced.
Oh, snap. Okay, so that I am now finished with my discussion. I'm ready to go to the Wheat Sheaf.
Wheat Sheaf, time to go to the Wheat Sheaf. So it has been a long time since we have done a podcast, because of the guys having done the last.
Yeah, we passed it off to the boys. Did you get any mail from people about the last episode?
No mail about that, but I do have a lot of mail. First, congratulations to Alicia, who won the copy of A Contrary Wind. And thank you to Lona again for lending us the copy. And I also heard from Colleen from near Toronto, because where else?
Everyone's from Toronto.
Everyone who likes this is from Toronto.
Look, we are huge. We are huge in Toronto.
Well, someone, said, it's just a huge population center in Canada. Like most people live there. So, and Colleen did say outside of Toronto. So, but she had written in to say, just to give us a vote for the Austen Project books and Eligible and Bridget Jones' Diary. So we got, definitely got those on our list. And then we heard from Hannah as well. So thanks for writing, Hannah. Hannah just wrote to check in, say hi, say glad Maggie's not saying BAE because that's late. So
yeah. Oh, I get so many. It's very cute. I get so many messages from people where I guess I don't mention it enough, like in every time I say his name, but I do refer to Bayard as Bay. And so almost after every episode, we get a message or an email from someone who has learned that his name is Bayard and that it's not BAE. And it's just like every episode a new fan discovers excuse me, that Maggie is not just being weird and trying to like be up on the pop culture. That is his name. That is his actual name.
We're too old to say BAE. We're too old for that.
I think everyone's too old for that. That's just a stupid thing. It just sounds stupid, like saying my boo.
Yeah, boo.
Remember when it was my boo?
Kevin still calls me.
I promise you all that I would never use a term as goofy as bae to describe my significant other.
When
we're in public, it's awkward because I feel like if I go like, bae, come look at this, people look at me like, who do you think you are?
Yeah. I remember the first time you referred to him in my hearing, I was struck with like, is that a name? Like what? But I never would have assumed it was BAE. So I'm doing better. I'm doing one better by you than most people.
Well, you do know me too. I think you know that I don't really I don't use slang like that.
Yeah.
I'm much more likely to call him the old ball and chain or my bitch. Or no, I'm just kidding. That's rude. I wouldn't do that.
Your bitch.
My bitch.
Hey, it's funny because it's true.
He's making a really sad face at me right now. He just looked over to me and gave me his like grumpy face. It's very cute.
Yeah. So Hannah, thanks for writing. And then we also heard from Sean, our listener Sean, who is from rural Australia. And he checked out the 1995 Persuasion because of our review. So we're doing some, good in the world, promulgating that excellent adaptation. He also wrote to say that the guy who plays John Willoughby in the Sense and Sensibility, you know, the Emma Thompson version, is also in Cranford, which I didn't realize. So
That's right.
if you haven't seen Cranford, it's a very cute sort of like English villagey type serial. And
isn't that the guy that Emma was dating? The one who plays Willoughby in Sense and Sensibility with Emma Thompson. Like, didn't she go on to date him for quite a long time?
That's what you had said, but
that's true. That happened, and I like that too because she's older. Again, like an older woman.
Yeah,
younger dude.
Yeah. Good for her. You go,
also,
Emma.
It's Emma Thompson. Whatever. She's awesome. I'd date her.
Yeah, I mean, she like ditched Kenneth Branagh, so she definitely.
Well, let's be honest. Kenneth Branagh pretty much is. What's the character he plays in Harry Potter?
Oh, Gilderoy Lockhart.
He is Gilderoy Lockhart. Come on.
He's a better actor than Gilderoy Lockhart.
Yeah, but he is Gilderoy Lockhart, who just happens to also be a good actor.
Good actor.
There wasn't a lot of acting that went on in the second Harry Potter movie on his part. I think he just showed up and said the lines like, that's probably really unfair. I'm sure he's very nice.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I can never say a word against him because of his Much Ado About Nothing adaptation, which is one of my.
We should watch that together.
I love that movie.
Me too. I haven't seen it in so long.
But okay, so and Sean also wrote in with another interesting question that I think we should address more fully on a different podcast. But he did ask, what is in our opinion, the worst adaptation? And I think I would like to explore that question in depth, but I can give an immediate answer. It is the Patricia Resmaa Mansfield Park.
Oh, I have an immediate answer. Mine is the version of Pride and Prejudice they did in like the 1940s. Is the 1940s with Sir Laurence Olivier?
Yeah.
But they like weirdly set it in Victorian times.
Yeah. Yeah.
We watched it in high school, and I remember thinking like, "What the hell is going on?"
That's one that Sean said. That was his.
Yeah, Sean, I feel we are on the same wavelength.
He's like he says some leeway can be given for the likely absence of research on Regency era clothing, but the slur against librarians was unforgivable because they make Mr. Collins a librarian instead of a
So I think what really happened is this was okay. I can tell you exactly what happened. They made that movie around the same time they were making things like Gone with the Wind. And they just had a shit ton of those costumes. So this is probably 100% true. I mean, I don't know for sure, but if you research it, the studio is probably like, look, we don't have a lot of Regency stuff, but what we do have is a lot of hoop skirts.
Yeah.
Because everyone was doing they were doing Gone with the Wind, and then all the other studios were doing Gone with the Wind ripoffs.
I would buy that for sure.
So everybody had like late like mid 1800s to late 1800s style clothing costumes on hand.
I also wanted to congratulate you on having done your panel at AwesomeCon.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was really fun.
Inclusive Spaces in Gaming. Is that what it was called?
Yeah, so this was our third year presenting at AwesomeCon. It's a big DC pop culture, sci-fi convention. Hey, except I didn't have a meet cute in an elevator. But this is the third year at DC that I presented along with some good friends of mine about increasing diversity in game spaces, both online and in person. And we're actually giving another panel at another convention over the 4th of July weekend in Crystal City in Arlington, which is called Blurred Con, which stands for Black Nerds, sort of like a celebration of diversity within fandoms. So that'll be fun.
That's awesome. You do so many
Hopefully, we won't
things,
blow it.
Maggie.
Yeah.
You are a Renaissance woman for sure.
People just like to hear me blabber, apparently.
We could also do I wanted to ask you also, okay, so if you had a fan of the podcast, so if we had got a fan and it was a celebrity, what celebrity would you like to have listening to our podcast?
So this is a hard question. You asked me this earlier, so I'd have time to think about it. And I wanted to come up with someone who not only would be a fan and is famous and has money and stuff and could give us money, but who could also like help spread the gospel of Jane Austen. And I was having trouble thinking of someone. And then Bay looked at me and said, Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my God, yes. We'll write a fucking musical about one of the shows. Everyone, it'll be just like when Pride and Prejudice came out in 1995, and everyone will be reading Austen. And I thought that was kind of the perfect answer.
That is a really fun answer. I have to admit that mine is a little bit weirder. So I follow Alexandra Petrie on Twitter. Do you know who that is?
I do not.
She writes humor and satire for the Washington Post.
Oh, okay, cool.
What I found out by following her on Twitter is that she's a Jane Austen fan.
Yes.
And she, I tweet at her all the time because I love her and I retweet her stuff. And she has liked four different tweets of mine over the course of a couple months. And so A, this is proof that I'm funny. And B, this is proof that Alex and I should be friends. And C, it's proof that she would like the podcast. So if I had
them contain links to the podcast?
Oh no, no, I don't.
Okay.
I don't tweet it. I don't on that Twitter account. I tweet about politics, so I keep it anonymous. So I don't tweet about anything about who I am or my writing or my podcast.
That's a good idea because the internet is crazy.
Yeah. So I mean, it's not too bad, but every once in a while, I put a swear in there or something. So
I'd be more worried about people like showing up at my house with death threats or something.
Yeah. No, it's not too bad. But mainly, I just follow like writers that I love and people that a lot of reporters that I really enjoy following and like tweet at them and then they never respond. So Alexandra Petrie is the one person who does actually like my my efforts. So it makes me feel like someone's listening. So that's good.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, so it would be so cool if she listens. Another one that would be good would be Mallory Ortberg of The Toast and now of Slate, because she wrote this book, Texts from Jane Eyre, which texts back and forth between literary characters, which is a really funny book. But I think she would be an Austen fan too. And
I was trying to think of someone who would be like a big name in the Austen community. Who if they liked us, they could tell people about us, and then more people who are like deep into the Austen fandom could discover us. But I couldn't actually think of anyone.
This is more for my like warm fuzzies than it is for people telling other people about us, because as you know, I'm afraid to get popular because I don't want hate mail.
Oh, but Kristen, you always got to have me, I've always got the hunter's instinct. I'm always trying to spread the word.
Spread the word.
I'm doing this podcast for the fame. Let's make that clear.
Yeah.
Because this is clearly the way to do it.
Yeah, clearly the way. We have like 200 subscribers, so we're almost there.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. I mean, by rights we should probably have no subscribers, so I think that's pretty amazing. So
based on the quality, I would say we should only have like our mothers.
Quality, yeah. And speaking of self-promotion, there are still codes for Goddess, the audiobook, if anyone else is interested.
It was really good. The reader was really amazing. I don't know if there's any chance that she'll ever listen to this, but I thought she did a fantastic job. And it really reminded me again of how good your book is, Kristen.
Oh, thank you. Well, and I didn't say a whole lot about it, about actually what the book is about in the last podcast. So I'll just like really briefly say that I wrote this book after I read The Feminine Mystique, which is about what happened. Yeah, well, we read it in book club. I read it with Maggie. So what happens in The Feminine Mystique is that Betty Friedan describes that after World War II, when all the men came back and took the jobs back, all of these publications started pushing out this ideal of the woman, the ideal woman as a housewife and is
happy in the home.
Happy in the home. And so what I did in the book Goddess is that the main characters have been given that fiction and been told to worship Vesta, and Vesta is fake. So they've been told basically by the elder religious statesmen of the time, they've been given like this fake ideal of domestic. And so once they figure out in the first scene, they're like, the flame goes out and they're like, oh my God, is Vesta real? That's when they start to discover that it's a fiction, just like what happened with the women's movement. They're like, no, the women's in the places in the home, that's a fiction. And so it's sort of a feminine work where it's supposed to have it's got a positive message for young girls or whatever. And we did just get a review in the Audio Bookworm blog, which is obviously a blog where they review audiobooks. That was a 4.25 star review, and the author was extremely complimentary, said that she wanted to read a sequel, thought it was well plotted and great characters. And so anyway, if you want to read the review, it is on the Audiobook Worm website. And yeah, you should check it out. Still got codes. Just shoot us an email. Our email is firstimpressionspodcast@gmail.com. So
I think you'll really like it. I thought it was great. And the reader was really great. Sometimes you listen to audiobooks and you like the story, but you just can't keep listening to it because you find the reader really annoying. And this girl was very good.
Yeah, she's really, really good. So yeah, I'm hoping to get her. I mean, she's the one I'm really hoping to get her exposure and her some money for having done this up front for free. And so yeah, check it out if you have a spare couple of moments. And it's Goddess, and my author name again is Callista Hunter. So
Callista Hunter. We have to say it like that.
Callista Hunter, Callista. It's 2 L's. So anywho, I think.
So do we have anything else to discuss, Kristen?
Yeah, I think that's it.
But I don't want to leave.
Oh, another successful podcast on.
But what are we going to talk about next time? We've been kind of delaying getting to Pride and Prejudice because it's the big one, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Is it time yet, or do you want to keep pushing it off?
No, let's do it. Let's jump back into Pride and Prejudice. I think we were going to have a lot to say about it for sure. And then after we do
let's do it. Let's start it next time. Because let's be honest, we're going to talk for probably like 4 episodes about it. Yeah. And maybe we can time it so that the last Pride and Prejudice book episode is the one that we can record in person when you're here for our friend's wedding.
That's a good idea. All right. Well, then we will plan to do that.
Okay, so gentle listeners,
get your Pride and
pull out those battered old loved copies of probably one of your favorite books of all time, because next time it's Pride and Prejudice, baby.
That's right. Woo! Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right, it's time to go. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.